Hey, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. First off, it is a nice one today. It is. So I'm out here in the sun catching some. First, I want to welcome all of our new subscribers, both here on YouTube and over on Patreon. We keep getting a flood. I know life is getting more and more interesting, and we have a lot of interesting things to talk about. I do say for all of you newer people, I occasionally remember to say that I think I have the smartest commenters in YouTube land, and if you will go down and read some of the comments, don't just watch my video, but read the comments. We've got some sharp people down there. You're going to learn a lot, and I hope that you will contribute to it as well, to the conversation. I'm sure that everybody here has something to offer, and I am always interested in reading the comments. Another surveillance plane circling. No, I'm kidding. Over on Patreon, it gets a little bit deeper. If you wonder what's on Patreon, I always put the link down here. It's everything that I put here on YouTube, plus things that I don't put here on YouTube, plus news and music and things like that. It's kind of the things that catch all things that I find that I think kind of has an application to what's going on in our world, and I think you'll understand that and enjoy it. If you'd like to join us, hope that you do. I was watching just a few days ago a sermon by R.C. Sproul, where I think he entitled "The Tyranny of the Weaker Brother." And I won't go into the whole message of that. It had to do how those who don't understand have a tendency to have sway over those who do. But this isn't the religious channel, so I'll end that right there. But it applies to what I want to talk about today, and it's just something that I've had on my list of videos to make, and that is, how is it that the weak control the strong? And it's true, they do. How did they come to do that? Way back in the 60s, don't worry, I will spin this up really quick. I won't spend a lot of time on that. But I should interject here, if you've been a part of an organization, you realize that the strong people rarely rise to the top anymore. It used to be that they did, but they don't anymore. And you have people, the weak people, and the victim classes running things now. I want to talk about how that happened. Back in the, I had somebody leave a comment the other day. Sorry, I'll circle back here. I had somebody leave a comment the other day about, why don't you give us all a break and clear your throat before you start your videos? It's just horrible to listen to. Well, that's rude. So he is no longer with us, but I do apologize. It's allergy season, and sometimes my allergy pills just don't kick in, and sometimes I forget to take them. So sorry, it's like you're sitting here with me. I try not to do anything more than absolutely necessary, but life, right? I was in a group of people the other day. I'll start it off with this. I was in a business setting the other day, and there were a number of people around, and I made this statement, and there were a lot of people there who were of my social and political bent, which is conservative and traditional, and I made the statement out loud that I believed that marriage was between a man and a woman, and boy, you could have heard a pin drop. And some kind of looked like, oh man, I can't believe he said that. And there were a couple over around the fringes that I could tell were just kind of listening closer, you know, like they were gonna mark this down and probably later let somebody know that I had said something that hateful. How did we get there? I feel like the Godfather. How did things ever get to be this way? Back in the early 60s, men wanted to be men and women wanted to be women. And then the Beatles came out. No, I'm not blaming everything on the Beatles, though I know there are some who do. And the counterculture took hold, and drugs started being used for fun. What the word they call that? Anyway, drugs had been used for years and years, but only by social outcasts, to be honest. And then they started becoming recreational. That's what I was trying to think of. Then they started being introduced as the Beatles came in and the counterculture, you know. And before that, we had, if you remember the music, if you're old enough to remember the music, you know, all the songs were about love songs and happiness and things like that. And boys and girls loving each other, having a crush, you know. Johnny Angel. But the music took a different turn. The society took a different turn. Drugs came in. They were being used recreationally. Kids being brought up by the greatest generation who didn't want their kids to have it as hard as they had were spoiled. Too many of them, not all of us, but too many of them were. They had time on their hands. They weren't taught to respect their elders. They weren't taught to work. They weren't taught to have responsibility. So they didn't respect their elders. They didn't respect their parents. The parents that thought that they were doing well by their children, to give them things and reduce expectations on them, were ruining their children, and as a result ruined the future of our society. I believe that that's where all of this started. As this continued to go along, we had Woodstock, and we had the hippies, and we had the demonstrations against the Vietnam War, and we had all that mess and fiasco. A great change came over our country. And that change minimized the importance of traditional values, and we started seeing the rise of the victim class. All of a sudden, those people who didn't want to put in the work and weren't tough enough, to be honest, to compete in the world, found that they could have all of their shortcomings excused by claiming that they were victims, either as a result of their gender, their race, their political, whatever, you know. You still didn't have people walking around, men, I want to call them men. You still didn't have males walking around with pink hair, okay? But you did have them starting to walk around with unmanly characteristics and traits that were no longer despised by society. And I use that word purposely, despised. You didn't have, in the old days, you did not, you didn't, you know, back in my time, if a guy acted girlish, it wasn't accepted. As a matter of fact, it was bullied. When people, that's how society keeps itself going. A society keeps itself strong by making sure that the members in it stay within certain bounds of acceptable behavior. And for a guy to act girly was not acceptable. You know, I understand the imbalance there, that tomboys were kind of held up, and a girl could run around in jeans, and everybody says, oh, she's a real tomboy, she's tough, she can climb trees, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have absolutely no problem with that. Don't know why, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But on the other hand, guys were expected to act like guys. They were expected to act manly. We were raised, we wanted to be men, okay? We didn't look forward to growing up to be overgrown boys because we didn't see any of them around. We had no models of unmanly men. Every man we saw was a manly man who was responsible for the support and the protection of his family, for the raising of his children. I tell people I never knew a single kid. By the time I got out of high school, I graduated in 1971. I never knew a single kid whose parents had been divorced. Anyway, back to this. Society had a way of keeping people in line and keeping people on the team and participating. And when somebody started getting too close to that line, the derisive remarks started coming at them. And you know what I mean by that. And you know what that had a tendency to do? That had a tendency to go, ooh, I'm close to the fence, I better get back in here if I'm not going to be harassed and bullied and things like that. And so it kept them on the mark. The result was that most of them, as they grew up, did not identify themselves as victims, for the most part. There were some who did. They did not identify themselves as victims. They had come up against the the restraints of society were shown that their behavior was outside the norm and it wasn't going to be accepted. That developed to the detriment of both society and those individuals, into over the years to where those aberrant behaviors were not only accepted but finally celebrated. And then it got to the point to where everybody else had to not just accept it, but celebrate it. And that's where we are today. How did that happen? It happened because weak people, yeah, I know I doubt if I'm offending any of you out here, but I don't care if I offend the people who need to hear this and need to be offended. Weak people who cannot stand up themselves and take a stand and act right and be responsible, act the way they should. They found a home among other victims. These people weren't victimized any more than anybody else. You know, you can talk about bullying. Bullies served a great purpose in society. There were many, many life lessons contained within the situation of the bully. It taught normal people to stand up. It taught normal people to get tough. It taught people to meet those kinds of challenges head on. You know, from those days came this, and I think this is Shakespeare actually, but it certainly was true that a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a brave man or whatever, only one. It taught those lessons. And as a result, it made those people grow up to be tough and not take any crap and stand for what they thought and not be bullied. When it got to the point to where little Johnny, if somebody said something rude to him, he could run home to mom, or the teacher would see it and take the person, you know, who had said the rude thing down to the counselor's office. And now it's a big village effort to straighten out the guy who said something rude, not Johnny. Johnny wasn't told to toughen up. Johnny wasn't told to stop acting weird. It was, oh, Johnny, we got to protect little Johnny because he's just so fragile. Well, all of a sudden, guess what? We got millions of little Johnnies and Janies who never were taught to act right and found an increasing power given to them by society by coming together as these huge blocks of victims. Okay. Now, the strong people never change. Strong people don't have a tendency to come together in groups. It's like the difference between eagles and chickens. Okay. Chickens like to stay around, or prey birds, they like to stay around, you know, in a whole bunch of others. You know, they find safety in numbers. Eagles aren't like that. Strong people aren't like that. They tend to, where eagles soar individually or in pairs, strong people tend to stand on their own. They will function with other strong people, and they prefer to function with strong people. But they don't band together in groups to have effect on other groups of people. That's what weak people do. That's what people who view themselves as victims do. Well, as we got millions and millions and millions more of these people who would prefer to think of themselves as victims than to stand up and develop some kind of strength, they came together in these large masses of groups, like large masses of goo, you know, in which there was really no individualism because they all felt the same. They all spouted the same pablum, you know, about, ooh, woe is me, you know, I'm a victim, life is unfair, and these people, who many of them found their place and their growing medium in universities, taught by socialist and Marxist and communist professors, spilled out the other end of these universities, full-blown Marxist victims who not only found great benefit now in their own victimhood, but felt that it was their job to evangelize and create more victims, to convince other people. Don't you realize you're a victim? Don't you realize that the man has been on you for years? Don't you realize that you can't get a job because of your gender, your race, your this, your that? Well, of course, none of that was true. None of it was true. But, well, you know, little minds full of mush, like Russ used to say, they're easily filled up with whatever, you know, is the loudest noise that's being shouted into their ear. And everybody wants to belong. Well, not everybody, but most people want to belong. And they found out that these were easy groups to belong to, because other groups, you actually had to do something. You had to accomplish something. You didn't have to accomplish a darn thing to be a part of the victim group. All you had to do is say, you're right, I'm a victim. I'm being kept down because of my whatever, you know. And so they started forming their groups, and they went and they got jobs. And they worked for universities, and they worked for not-for-profits, and they worked for whatever in the world. And the weirder they got, and the farther they got off the reservation, ooh, there's a trigger word, right? The more that they were accepted. And finally they found out that they had gotten society to the point to where none of the strong people who they despised for their independence and their strength, none of the strong people would dare say anything against them, for fear of being hauled down to HR, right? Or socially ostracized, or being canceled, or whatever. Well, boy, they had found their strength. Through their weakness, they developed into these big social groups, social justice warriors. They took over the universities. They took over the churches, most of them. Okay, too many churches now. Every church that I've seen lately, that I've had not every. I'm going to take that back. I said something was wrong. Too many churches that I've seen lately, run by a bunch of little pansy social justice warriors. No experience in life. No stand up and be strong. It was changing. They have changed. I'm going to slip in something here, just a little bit religious. They have changed the Word of God and the message of Christ to be accepting of all behaviors, as opposed to maintaining it as a standard against which all things are measured and to which all things should be attempted. So now we have most of our companies, our military, for crying out loud. My gosh, these people, everybody in the world now has to go through sensitivity training to be sensitive to the needs of victims, to be sensitive to the needs of the professionally offended, to be told how whatever they, you know, if they belong to a certain group, if you belong to the group that I am, you see what group I'm in right here. If you belong to my group, you are an oppressor. You have to go, and these schools are being filled with this CRT. Now, the good thing is, parents like me, we see these things as opportunities to tell our kids the truth. As a matter of fact, Kelly and I welcome these opportunities to say, these people are fools, they are idiots, and here's the truth. But more and more people all over the country are now standing up, and they're fighting back. And if you've seen some of these mama bears, standing up to school boards and some papa bears too, but the mama bears are just funny. I enjoy watching them. They really get at it. How they're fighting back. They are fighting back these school boards. They are demanding for resignations. And there are people out there, and I know I always get comments, nothing's going to happen. Yes, things are getting done. They are happening. I invite you to join the process, as opposed to just sitting back and saying, nothing's ever going to get done. Okay, don't be a whiner. That's the sound of a victim. Okay, get it? Okay, so the victims, these people who didn't have the chutzpah, the guts, the strength to stand up and make something of themselves, have found a home in this big mass of victimhood, and they're comfortable in it. Now, what do we have to do? We need to start tearing that apart. The little thing that I said the other day, it didn't matter to me. I'll say it right now. I said it then, I'll say it today, I'll say it whenever anybody wants to know, and maybe even if they don't want to know. In our opinion, in my opinion, a marriage is between a man and a woman. And a man shouldn't have pink hair. How about that? And a man shouldn't act like a woman. How about that? Wow. You know, that's just common sense. When common sense has made to be hate speech, we know that we're approaching the end. Well, we might be approaching the end, but whether or not this is the end depends on us. It doesn't depend on them. We can't let it depend on them anymore. We have been letting them run this show for too long simply because we thought it was so silly, so stupid. Who would believe it, right? Well, we've seen how many people believe it, and now we're being having to live according to rules laid down by these morons. Are you kidding? Okay. It's time to start taking it back to them. Call things for what they are. You know, it's gotten to the point to where the worst thing, the biggest threat that somebody can make against you, you know, used to be, I'm going to kick your butt. Used to be, I'm going to, all sorts of things. Now it's, I'm uncomfortable with what you said. And all of a sudden, everybody knows the weight, the mountain of social opinion and HR is going to be dumped on your head. Well, excuse what I'm about to say, but to hell with that. No more. No more at all. Put yourself in this fight. Stop taking that junk from the victims. If they want to act like a victim, call them out. Tell them they're a victim. Tell them that you have no respect for that kind of behavior. And they did it. They did it with words. We can't use our best weapons, which we are far better at than they are. But you know what? If we engage, we can use our weapons. We can use our argument. We can use our words. But we haven't been doing it. It is time to do it. I'm going to leave it right there. I could go on, as you can tell, for an hour on this stuff. But I think that I've gotten the point across that I wanted to. It's time to stop this silliness, this idiocy that has taken over our country and our world and is sending our society straight down into the ditch. So I'm going to leave you with that. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. And I think preparations right now ought to be thinking about how you take this fight out there. Take it to them. Take it to them. And first, let's start taking this culture back so that our next efforts will have more of an effect. Okay? You all have a great day. Get out there and piss somebody off. Bye-bye.